Is infidelity a genetic disease? My boss, Jim Wright, gave me a quick tour of the hotel so I could see just how extensive the electrical upgrades were going to be. In the meantime, he was supposed to meet the hotel owners at their office. I walked around the pool, smartly, without letting anyone know that I was trying my best to capture all the cleavage I could. That's when I saw a red-haired fox in her early 40s chatting with a man obviously several years younger than her. They pulled their lounge chairs closer together, and the man put his hand on her left knee. At the same time, his elbow was constantly in contact with the lady's generously formed left breast. I immediately hurried away from the pool, relaxing only when I was out of sight of the people relaxing by the pool. I considered my options for behavior for a full 20 seconds. Instinctively, I knew what I needed to do, but briefly thought about the consequences, and I saw only one worthy course of action. Taking out his mobile phone, he sent a short message to his boss, and he carefully made his way back to the pool, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. I stood in the shade of the upper balcony with my phone's camera display on. Slowly counting to 25, he began to take pictures of the couple he had noticed earlier. The woman now lay on a lounge chair with her top undone as the man slowly applied sunscreen to her back, paying particular attention to the impressive area of her breasts that jutted out from under her torso and was on dramatic display. I had only been filming the video for a few seconds when a clearly angry man ran up to the couple. He grabbed a handful of the lotioner's hair and mercilessly yanked his head back. This exposed the man's chin and throat. I easily heard the thump as the angry man's fist met Romeo's throat. This was immediately followed by a second blow, this time to the man's chin. The man who had been courting a sensual red-haired woman moments earlier was now lying on the side of the pool, making terrible gagging noises as blood oozed from his mouth onto the pool deck. It all happened so fast that the woman barely had time to look back to see a very angry man rubbing his fist as he stood over her. This continued for several seconds before he grabbed her red locks. "Jim!" That's all she managed to blurt out before he pulled her to her feet by the hair on her head. I was still recording, so I captured her as the man turned her around to face him. "You fucking slut!" was all he could muster as he looked at his wife's panicked face and then down at her free breasts. I was afraid for a moment that he was going to hit her, but luckily he controlled his anger and simply pushed her back into the pool. Then he threw several chairs and plastic tables across the deck before he saw me standing to the side. He slouched noticeably and then awkwardly moved towards me. "Mike, get me to the fucking truck before I end up in jail," was all he could get out as tears streamed down his cheeks. I took Jim to the company truck parking lot. By this time, he had turned into a real zombie, and while I was driving along the freeway, he showed no emotion and looked straight ahead. The 2-hour drive home was spent in eerie silence, save for the occasional guttural sound escaping Jim's throat. I parked in the driveway and walked him home. Jim sat at the kitchen table while I grabbed 2 beers from the refrigerator. I placed one in front of him and opened the second for myself. Then he sat down on the chair opposite him. His unwavering gaze made me more than a little uncomfortable. I looked him in the eye for a few seconds before asking, "Did we get the contract?" Jim blinked at my question before suddenly bursting into a burst of laughter. "You stupid bastard," was all he muttered as he opened his beer and took a long sip. Perhaps my question was stupid, but it brought Jim out of his trance. That lying bitch told me she was going to spend a few days with her mother at her parents' lake house. She left yesterday morning. She must have been cheating on me with that damn Harris since yesterday. Damn it. I called her mother's cabin this morning and asked to speak to Kelly. Her mother told me she was in the shower, but she would ask her to call in a few minutes. Kelly called in about 10 minutes. If she was in her mother's closet on the lake at 10 o'clock in the morning, there's no way in hell she could have made it to Timberbrook by the time you found her with that bastard identical Harris. And that indicates that her mother was covering for her, I reasoned. That means her mother knew what the hell Kelly was doing and was covering for her. Jim repeated my words. Hell, she's been visiting her mother at the cottage every summer since we got married. Now I have to wonder how long. This shit has been going on, and whether identical was the first or just one of many. Jim had an interesting point of view, and I looked at it from every possible angle as I drove home. It seemed possible, even probable, that Jim's wife was aided and abetted in her betrayal by her own mother. Could this be an inherited trait, or simply some weakness that has been nurtured over generations? As I pulled into the driveway, I saw my mother-in-law's car. I didn't want to listen to her bullshit, so I parked and walked to the back door, knowing that my wife, Tracy, would be sitting at the kitchen table drinking wine with her mother. As usual, I was right. The only thing I didn't expect was the volume of the conversation. Well, to be honest, both the intensity and the content of the conversation were a little shocking. "Holy shit, Mom!" Tracy practically screamed at her mother. "You know how much Dad hates identical? What the hell were you thinking?" I couldn't help but feel a little proud of Tracy's outrage at her mother's actions. She and I vowed to be faithful throughout our married life. Tracy and I definitely saw eye to eye on this issue. "Please don't call Bentley identical. It was an accident. Besides, he's still capable of performing quite well," Kelly insisted. "It's not an accident," Tracy replied. "You were walking in broad daylight with another man instead of your dad, and only 2 hours away from home. I warned you not to let your guard down, but you did it anyway. I thought we were far enough from home to be safe. I don't know why your father was there or how he found us at the pool. He never goes to hotels, much less their pools. How are you? Do you think he's cheating on me?" "No, I don't know," Tracy replied. "Daddy adores you. He would never cheat, and I'm sure he had no idea you were cuckolding him. That's why his reaction was so strong. He must have been shocked to see how identical rubs lotion on your big breasts." "Bentley only rubbed the lotion on the sides of my breasts," Kelly said. "He was a real gentleman." "I'm sure he did. Dad punched him in the throat and then broke his jaw for no reason. How are you going to deal with that, Mom? Looks like Dad's really pissed off. I'd like to stay with you for a few days until your father calms down, if that's okay with you. You know how much Jim adores me. He'll get over this little mistake." "Maybe until he finds out about your other mistakes," Tracy suggested. "You know this won't end well." Did Kelly make other mistakes, as Tracy called them? Did my wife know about them? She didn't seem very surprised that her mom was with identical. This information was alarming. Not wanting them to know that I was in the house and eavesdropping on their conversation, I quietly went out the back door and walked around the front of the house. Mother and daughter fell silent as soon as the door opened. I nodded to the now silent duo and walked over to the refrigerator and pulled out a beer. It occurred to me that they had no idea how much I knew about the events of the day and were waiting for me to somehow show my knowledge. But I turned around and went upstairs to take a shower. They should have been interested in how much I knew, how I would react, what I would say, and who I would tell it to. However, I decided to leave them guessing. The whole situation was damn unpleasant, and Tracy's role in it was disturbing, to say the least. It struck me that Tracy obviously knew her mom was promiscuous, but never mentioned it to her dad, or me. Keeping such a secret was the same as lying, as far as I could tell. I had just finished changing my clothes when Tracy came into the bedroom. "Mom and Dad had a little fight today. Mom wants to stay with us for a few days until they sort out their differences." I told her I agreed. "I hope you don't mind." What kind of husband would I be if I objected to my wife's mother staying a few days? I answered rhetorically. "Your parents deserve special attention. Look how good your father was to me. He really is a great guy." Tracy seemed to be searching my face for any hint of my feelings. When I mentioned her father, she flinched a little, but maybe it was my imagination. "That's one of the reasons I love you so much, Mike. You always treat me and my family like we're special," Tracy replied. "I've been working with your dad for 5 years. I knew him before I met you, and he's special. He gave me my first real job. He's a good boss, a great father-in-law, and the best father a girl could ever have." For some reason, my praise of her father didn't seem to resonate with Tracy as much as it should have. I had never noticed this before, but now it seemed to me that Tracy was feeling some guilt about her mother's extramarital escapades. Did I just not notice anything before this? Kelly spent half of dinner asking me questions about work. She wanted to know what projects we had going on, what we were bidding on, and where I was working that day. It was obvious that she was trying to find out how much I knew and how Jim ended up at the same hotel where she had ordered the identical special the night before. I avoided any mention of Jim being asked to carry out upgrade work at the Blood Hotel, or of my role in the debacle at the swimming pool. I decided that my wife and her mother weren't the only people who might have secrets. After dinner, I announced that I was going to mow the lawn. With my suspicions dominating my thoughts, I secretly left my phone in recording mode behind a banana on the kitchen counter, away from the dishwasher. It was getting dark by the time I finished putting the mower away. Both women were watching Survivor on the TV in the living room. I put the phone in my pocket and said goodnight to them before heading upstairs to the master bedroom. Then I listened to a recorded conversation between my wife and my mother after I left home. It was an eye-opener, to say the least. The two women hatched a plot to get Jim's forgiveness. They floated a few ideas, but basically it came down to Kelly having various kinds of sex with Jim, stupidly for as long as it took him to fully forgive and trust his wayward wife. My wife helpfully suggested that Kelly increase the number of sessions and experiment a little with sex. Try something new to bring as much pleasure to Jim as possible. Kelly wasn't thrilled with this option. I only allowed my lover to experiment and have different kinds of sex with me, and only on special occasions, because Bentley's big tool made me reconsider this decision. Kelly said, "Who knew that Identical had such a big instrument?" Tracy jokes. "To be honest, I've heard some rumors," Kelly admitted. "Mom heard Mary Chase telling Sue Land about how big Bentley's instrument was, and she mentioned it to me." "Grandma told you that Identical had a big instrument? I'm surprised she didn't try it on for size when Grandpa went on one of his golf trips." "You're hiding your eyes. Don't tell me that Identical had sex with Granny. She's about 62 or something," Tracy said with obvious amazement. "That was a couple of years ago, and I hope to look as good as my mom when I'm her age," Kelly said. "It really turns Bentley on when he talks about sleeping with a mother-daughter combination. He even wanted me to ask if he could do a hat trick with you. Not many men have 3 generations of a family." "Are you kidding me?" "He's almost as old as Daddy, and he only has 1 nut," Tracy noted. "I can't even imagine being with him. By the way, how big is his instrument?" "Let's just say you won't be disappointed," Kelly replied, as if she were recommending a good hairdresser. "Just make sure I don't bounce Bentley's little grandson on my lap. I never cheated on Mike, and I certainly wouldn't start with 1 nut," Tracy said. "I want Mike to be the father of all our children. That's the only thing I care about. I love that guy." "I love your dad, too. That's why this is all so difficult." "I don't want a divorce," Kelly insisted. "It's just that he works so many hours and comes home so tired. We are lucky that we have sex a couple times a week. That's why I needed a Bentley." "Really, Mom? What about George Marsh, Jeff Stevens, and God knows who else?" "I don't like the way this conversation is going. Let's go watch Survivor. I think that fat-assed Italian girl is going to get voted out this week," Kelly said in an apparent attempt to change the subject. I saved the conversation to a flash drive and went to bed, knowing that I would have very little sleep that night. I had a lot to think about. Work the next day was excruciating. Jim was a complete mess as he handed out work assignments to start the day. There were 5 of us working at Wright Electric, and we exchanged glances as Jim stammered through his instructions. As usual, Jim and I were working together on our current project, so he climbed into the passenger seat of the company truck. We were doing electrical wiring in a house under construction, so we could talk freely without fear of anyone overhearing us. Once Jim started telling me about his situation, he continued talking throughout the morning. I guess it was cathartic for him, but it further confused my mental state. I had a hard time reconciling what I heard from my wife and her mother with the future I envisioned for myself. Will Tracy end up becoming a wandering wife like her mother and apparently her grandmother? Will I have enough influence in her life to keep her faithful? Was it worth risking a failed marriage or living the life of a cuckold? Kelly called me this morning, Jim began. She told me she wanted to apologize for possibly giving me the impression that she cheated on me with Bentley. She calls the bastard Bentley. She said it was the only time she had ever cheated or even come close to it. He had been stalking her for months, and she finally succumbed to his charm and he scored an amazing ball. I asked how long her mother had been covering for her affairs, and she began to stutter. It never occurred to her that it was obvious to me that her mother was lying about her whereabouts. We exchanged a few nasty words and I hung up. I didn't know if I should have given Jim the information I gleaned from my eavesdropping. If he decided to make peace, it would only make the situation worse. I decided to give him time to decide for himself, but I did it in a decisive manner. Jim, you need to take your time and figure out what's really going on. This may or may not be the first time. I suggest you think about the situation and weigh the full implications of your decision, whether you keep Kelly or kick her to the curb. I feel sorry for you, Mike. You're married to my daughter, but you work with me, so you're in the middle of this mess. I feel like I wasted 25 years of my life. If it weren't for Tracy, I'd say, my married life has been a meaningless sham. Having a wonderful daughter and a reliable son-in-law is my only saving grace. I was still undecided on my next course of action when I returned home that evening. As soon as I entered the kitchen, Tracy and her mother attacked me from all sides. Dad told Mom that you were the one who told him Mom was at the pool with Bentley, Tracy said with great anger. What kind of asshole would try to ruin his wife's parents' marriage? Really? And what did you think I should have done? I asked more calmly than I actually felt. You could have told me Jim was around and gotten the hell out of the pool, Kelly interjected. It would be like a gentleman. I was afraid that you would lose the pleasure of having identical massage your breasts in public. I was only thinking about you. Although your naked breasts were distracting as hell, I retorted. It's not my fault that you and yours mother lead to Jim, that you cheated on him with one crazy miracle, that your breasts were seen by many, that Jim beat up a cocky bastard in cold blood, and that you're trying to sell a bunch of crap to one of the best guys I've ever met. Did you hear about Grandma lying to Jim? Tracy asked. It just keeps getting worse and worse. You have no idea how bad it is, I said. You knew that your mother and grandmother were sluts, and yet you lied to help them maintain that status. Now you're all mad at me because your mother was so damn stupid that she allowed a scumbag, one declared bastard, to play with her breasts in public like it's my fault. I'll stick to my decision to be honest and upfront with Jim while you two try to justify the fucking crap you've been doing to your father and grandfather all these years. I could see the worry on Tracy's face as she considered my words. I never cheated on you and never would. I'm not like my mother and grandmother. I tried to help them keep their nasty secrets, but I didn't like it. I constantly told them to stop their affairs and be faithful to their husbands. Is that what you said? Kelly asked before Tracy could give her a death glare. Oh, yes, that's what she said, Kelly agreed suddenly, as awareness of Tracy's plight washed over her. She said she would never cheat on you and insisted that my mother and I start following the rules of fidelity. I was wrong to let Bentley seduce me, but it will never happen again. I learned my lesson. I swear it. George Marsh and Jeff Stevens also had big instruments and were just extremely convincing, I blurted out. Tracy, did you tell Mike about George and Jeff? Did you turn your back on me to save your ass? Kelly demanded. How could Mike know about them if you didn't tell him? Oh, no. Then Kelly howled. Did you tell Jim about George and Jeff? What about Bill Simons? Does Jim know about him too? Not yet, I replied with a smile. The next day at work was interesting because of all the life-changing decisions. I told Jim everything I overheard his wife and daughter talking about. He was angry as hell, and then incredibly depressed. I don't see a choice, Mike. I'm going to contact a lawyer and get a divorce. Don't try to talk me out of it. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied gloomily. I thought we could use the same lawyer and maybe get a better rate. But Tracy said she never cheated on you, Jim argued. There's no reason for you to divorce Tracy. She loves you. I know she does. I know Kelly loves you, and I wouldn't try to talk you out of divorce. You're the one who helped me make the decision, Jim. If I didn't have your wisdom and experience, I might have been tempted to stay with Tracy. You told me that you apparently wasted 25 years being married to a cheater. I don't want to be in the same situation in 23 years. I have no more trust in your daughter. I would spend every day worrying that she is looking for someone else with a bigger instrument. I know damn well that Tracy will insist on allowing Kelly and Kelly's mother to see our children and influence their lives. Leaving Tracy alone with my daughters would make me uneasy, but allowing your wife and her mother to even talk to, they scare me to death, I admitted. You understand why I can't continue down this path, don't you? 4 years later, I decided to take my wife Amber out for our second anniversary. Our daughter Megan was 6 months old, and Amber's parents were more than happy to keep her overnight. Since it was our anniversary, I splurged on a room at the Ritz, which was almost 100 miles away. I made dinner reservations and couldn't wait to show my wife how much her love meant to me. I asked for a private table and was pleased when we were shown to a rather dark corner of the room. After we ordered our food and exchanged a few sexy jokes, Amber suddenly sat up straight and stared at the entrance. "Isn't that your ex-wife?" she asked. I remember she was 2 years older than me at school and looked like a fashion model. She's still beautiful. I heard she got married again, but I've never seen her husband. He looks like he's a little older than her. Actually, he's the same age as Tracy, I replied, turning to see my ex-wife sitting across the room. Well, he had a hard life back then. He looks old enough to be her father, Amber noted. That's not her husband. This guy only has one ball. It's a Bentley, I replied with a sigh. I made the right decision 4 years ago. Being with you and seeing Tracy now fills me with relief and joy. What does her husband look like? Amber asked when her curiosity was piqued. He looks just like the guy walking through the door with a baseball bat in his hand, I replied, mentally thanking my lucky stars.